on YouTube and now live on Facebook. And I got things a little more lined up so that I'm not doing the whole, that thing. So welcome. Thanks for watching. So today, the blog is about storytelling, and it's really interesting how I think many people recognize their own love of hearing a good story and the power that comes with that, and yet they don't take full advantage of it. We tend to want to lecture on things instead of telling stories where really the true power of what we're trying to convey can come across, but without the clinical setting. So, so today I'm going to share two stories, and after I tell you a little bit about how and why I tell stories. The first thing is, if you've seen The Art of Coaching High School Tennis, you'll see that it's got 88 chapters in it, and many of the chapters are just a couple simple stories about things that happened, and kind of, you can learn from what happened. I mean, it's, it's not principle based necessarily, so you can see it. Anyway, that's part of what's fun about that, is that people can, hear from my mistakes, and also stories aren't perfect. So, then it kind of takes the, kind of the mystery of, is the author perfect away? All right. So, mainly I will tell stories in the midst of practice because I want my players to be inspired to practice well and to put the work in. I'm not generally a big pep talk kind of a coach, so not very big on rah-rah right before the match. So, but there have been some exceptions to that. But, we'll get ready to do like a major fitness thing, and then I will tell a story about a player who dramatically improved their fitness, and they went from here to there, and it was awesome. But people didn't realize it had to do with the hard work. So, all right. But here's the scenario. All right. It's the morning. Good morning, Ben Price, there on Facebook. So it was the morning of tap to invite him to join your video as a guest. I don't get that. I don't understand that. So you can come in as a guest. I don't know what that means. All right. So, so it's the morning of the NCS playoffs, which is the North Coast section, so it's our sectional championship here in Northern California. First and second place teams go on to the Northern California Championships. At the beginning of the year, I had set the goal for myself with the team. I didn't really talk about it with the team, that I wanted them to go to the NorCal Regional Championship. It's a pretty big deal. Anyway, so that was my personal goal for them, and I didn't use it as pressure. And then, so we've got these semifinals and the finals coming up in the same day, and we come in as the 3 seeds. So we're playing the 2 seeds in the semis, and then if we win that, more than likely we'll have to face the number 1 seed, because the number 4 wasn't really that competitive. I mean, really, the top 3 teams were pretty even. And I'm not really big into pep talks. I really am not. But I was inspired, and what the reason why I wanted to tell 2 different stories to these kids was to help them prepare mentally. It wasn't like an emotional thing. I wasn't trying to get them jacked up emotionally. The story, so a really good story, it'll have a little bit of an emotional, inspirational theme to it. But really, it was just 2 rational stories to help them set their minds, because it was going to be a difficult day. It was going to be hot. It ended up being 97, which means it's way over 100 on the court. And And we were going to have to beat 2 teams seated above us if we were going to win the whole thing. So, all right. So here's the thing. I told 2 stories, and one of them is about Chuck, the kid who got in fights in high school. And then I told them the story about how when I was a kid, I used to always break my watch. So yeah, I'll let that sink in for a second. So it's the morning, and I get all the kids together, right? And I go, here, guys, I want to tell you some stories. I got a couple of things to say. I mean, you know the strategies. I mean, you know what we do. There's no news for me to give you here in terms of how we play this game, because we've been doing this for 10 weeks. So I have nothing to say on that. But I want to tell you about Chuck. So I was a high school teacher, and I was teaching math, and I had this one student, Chuck, who got in a fight, and he got suspended for 5 days from school. And then he comes back from his 5-day suspension, and he's missed a test. And then when he comes back, he has to retake the test, and he does poorly, and now he's got an F in my class. And I'm like, wow, that's a bummer, right? And, Chuck wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. He wasn't like a super bright math genius. But he was a nice kid. I mean, I didn't dislike him. He was respectful and decent and all that. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, he gets in another fight, and now he's out 5 days again. And he comes back. I mean, he's pretty close to 0% in my class. And I was like, this is like looking pretty hopeless. I mean, something's got to happen here. So he comes back from his suspension, and I pull him aside, and I say, hey, Chuck, what's up with all these fights? I mean, that's 10 days out of the school year gone, right? And then, if you get 20 days of suspension, then you could be expelled from school. This is pretty serious. You got to stop this. So he says, oh, well, here's the problem. I've been in fights before, and people know I'm really good at it. And then what they do is every day in the crowded hallway, people slug me in the arm trying to egg me on. Every day, somebody takes a swing at me. I'm like, wow, that's really tough. And here, I'm supposed to be like, a liberal teacher. I'm supposed to be for peace, right? I'm supposed to say, Chuck, be the bigger person. I'm supposed to be, find a way to make peace with these people, right? Do you see how that wasn't really going to work? And this is kind of the misguided thinking that people have about how to solve a problem like that. So anyway, I go, hey, Chuck, you know what you need to do? You need to take like martial arts or something, or boxing lessons, and you need to get so good that no one will ever want to fight you again. So he goes to King Gym in Oakland, where Andre Ward trains, and he takes boxing lessons, and he goes and he just becomes outstanding. He comes back, and he's at school, and two guys come up on him, and he knocks them both out with one punch. Just, and that was the end of it. Nobody ever challenged him again. So I think I don't even know if he got suspended. I hope somebody came to his, to advocate for him, that he was the one that was defending himself. I don't know, but he might have been suspended one more time. But after that, nobody wanted to fight him. So, and, then years later, the funny thing is years later, I see him at my grocery store, and he's working produce, and then he got the job as the butcher and all that. And then he became a manager of the supermarket, and then he got transferred to another position, and he's, married and got some kids and bought a house and all that. So, if he hadn't graduated from high school, then all of Chuck's outcomes are worse, right? So then I was like, all right, so what what does this have to do with you, the players today? Right? I said, look, you guys are pretty good, right? And I'm like, but you know what? We've got 2 opponents today, and we're going to have to knock them both out. Right? So this is, and I don't think I said it. Things get foggy as you get older and you remember things differently than they really happened. But in my recollection is I didn't say it in any way different than what I'm telling you right now. But I'm like, look, guys, you gotta knock 2 teams out today in the same day. So they're like, and I had already talked to my team the year before about being street fighters because, we had a team that we played the year before that really made the match extremely unpleasant. And oh my goodness, what's happening here in my back? All right, good. So we had a team that made it a match very, very unpleasant. They made it a very ugly fight, and they stole our lunch money, and that was not cool. So after that, we kind of adopted the mentality that we're street fighters and that we like a street fight. So then they toughened up a lot after that. All of this is, of course, very figurative. We weren't physically violent with other teams, but so then I was like, okay, now I have another story I need to tell you, and it's about when I was a kid and I was like 6 years old and I wanted a watch for my birthday. So my parents bought me a watch, and I would wind it and wind it and wind it. This is back when you had to do that. So wind it, and then it would break. And then my parents would be upset with me and all that. And then Christmas would come, and I would want a watch, right? And I would get the watch, and I would wind it, and it would break. Then my birthday would come around, right? And so you see where that's headed. And so, I've always kind of had this obsession with time. I think it's partly because of my Swiss heritage. It's a kind of a funny cultural, deeply ingrained thing. But so then I told them, look, guys, the time came when I learned how to wind my watch just enough and stop. So here's what's going to have to happen today, right? You're going to have to knock 2 teams out, and you're going to have to be just wound up enough, right? Because if you're overly wound, then things aren't going to go well, right? Now, one thing I do with my teams, especially before playoff matches and other sort of pivotal matches, I always open up to them the possibility that one or more of them might play the best tennis of their life. So I say, hey, it's possible. You could, because of this moment, really step up and play the best tennis of your life. And if that's happening, keep going. Don't ever disbelieve that. Don't ever disbelieve that you can be playing the best tennis of your life all the way through. Now, if you're not playing the best tennis of your life, then you still play the best you can today and compete very hard. I want to see a lot of really great competition. So, a funny thing happened, I think, after the talk about, knocking people out and being wound up just enough. 2 of my players in the first round, we won 5-2, which is pretty routine given that that team had beaten us earlier in the season, but that's another story. So that was the number 2 seed. And, but 2 of my, something went wrong during my broadcast, darn it. All right, so Facebook is gone. So if you're watching this now, then, so 2 players played pretty poorly in the first one, and I think they felt pressure to try to play their best tennis ever. So anyway, you know, in between matches, I said, hey, look, here's the great thing about this situation. You know, we as a team have 2 matches today, and you played poorly in the first one. And it's not often that you get to play poorly and lose and have another shot to go out there right away and do differently, right? So, you know, what was the problem in that first match? And you know, they gave me some reasons. I forget what they are, but they gave me some reasons of why they felt they weren't playing well. I'm okay. Well, then instead of that, do this. You know, I mean, just go out there and do the best you can, and let it take care of itself. And then what happened? Oh man, one guy played out of his mind. I mean, just, you know, winners lines. You know, perfectly splitting the doubles partners. You know, with shots. I mean, just, you know. And then the other kid played very, very well. I mean, he played about as close to the top of his ability he could. So it was just amazing to see them winning a straight sets victory over the #1 seed, having lost a tough one against the #2 seeds. You know, so you know, part of that I think can be chalked up to the stories. Now, one of the dangers as a coach in telling stories is that sometimes people perceive that it's your ego talking if you're a coach. And I'm like, interesting. So I'm telling these stories that are kind of embarrassing about myself, right? And or they are inspirational because they're about somebody else. And yet it's attributed to being of my ego. But it is good to kind of check ourselves and go, okay, am I pumping myself up? Am I telling a story about me? I think it's really a great idea to tell a story about someone else. And I try to do that almost all the time. I mean, every once in a while, I mean, I've had some matches that I'm very proud of, and you know, I'll sprinkle some in there just so that I can share a little bit of me and my struggles and my triumphant moments, because I think it's helpful. But you got to be careful telling too many stories about yourself. Anyway, so now the final word here too is your stories are different than my stories, and you want them to have kind of a mix of, and they can be stories about pro players. I mean, they can be stories about people you know. It doesn't really matter who the story is about necessarily, just that there's something meaningful about it that they can take from it. If the story doesn't have meaning, or it doesn't have enough detail to it, enough conflict, enough difficulty, then it's not necessarily something that models anything for people. So choose your stories wisely. Let them be authentic stories that come from yourself. I mean, the last thing you do is try to be like me. But accept that. Use stories to help players to understand, you know, certain things. All right. So thank you so much for watching. And then if I see comments, I hope to see some comments here, and then I'll keep track of those, and then I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right, thanks.